Hey, it's Cassie with Platinum Ag Services. I wanted to talk with you a little bit about management zones, as they are the foundation to our variable rate prescriptions. And they're not always something you get to see how we make them, because a lot of times we're doing this in the office in the wintertime. So there are several different pieces of information or data that you can use to make good management zones. The most common ones are imagery, yield data, soil types, elevation, information from your soil test, and sensor data. I like to use yield data, elevation, and soil test features the most, but I'm also looking at the bottom one, sensor data. These would be most often field mapping devices that you actually drive over the field, and they're capturing the texture differences as you go across the field. So for example, the first one is yield data. In this field, I've taken 6 yield maps that look similar to each other across different years. I would not use years that have multiple combines in the field because they can make yield maps that don't look accurate. We wouldn't use partial data, and we wouldn't use years of yield data that are anomalies, like a really wet year. So you can see for the most part, these 6 years are similar. We put them all together and get what's called a normalized yield map that you see on the left. So this is going to delineate fields that in red, it's going to delineate zones where in red are historically lower than average, white is around average, and green would be significantly above average. You can also use elevation to make zones. I'll use this often if we don't have yield data or soil test information, and it can be pretty accurate. You can see we've still similarly identified the highest and the lowest areas of the field. Sometimes I do also like to use soil test information, particularly CEC or cation exchange capacity, because it's related to the texture of the soil. So I'll put together CEC and elevation, and those make really nice zones for soybean variable rate seeding prescriptions, where you get the soil test information and the change in topography. I'm also starting to look at sensor data. So in this case, we took an electrical conductivity mapping device and drove it across the field. And if you put all 4 of those next to each other, yield data, elevation, CEC and elevation, and sensor data, you can see that there's differences, but they're pretty similarly picking up the lowest productivity areas and the highest productivity areas. And really at the end of the day, that's the goal. There's not a right or a perfect way to make management zones. We look at the data that we have, we decide what the best pieces of information would be to use, and sometimes it's different on every field or for different growers, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is to use the option that helps delineate the highest, lowest, and average productivity areas of the field. I hope that helps.